Hi guys, welcome to Gaming Watcher. My name is Rolson, and in this video I'll talk about why we all love to hate Destiny so much. Destiny has been dead since launch, and yet it's a thriving game with a very active community. A community that seems to be in constant outrage over the state of the game, and yet we keep playing it a lot. But what is it exactly that makes Destiny feel this way? Why does it feel so good but hurt so bad? Let's find out. Let's start out on the positive side and take a look at the obvious reasons why Destiny is such a good game. Environments. If there's one thing that everyone can agree on about Destiny, it is that the environments in the game are of an insanely high quality. Some of the destinations in the game are some of the most beautiful game environments that I've ever seen. I'm sure that a lot of you feel the same way. One thing is that Bungie is good at making an environment feel real by paying attention to all the small details and thinking through every nook and cranny of the maps. But another thing is that it's all executed with a sense of true artistic creativity. Like, look at the Dreaming City and Europa, for example. These are two very distinct environments in Destiny that have their own identity completely. The Dreaming City with its white and shining architecture and purple crystals breaking out from underground everywhere. When you move through the city, you truly get a sense of mystery and magic. It looks like a place where there would be such a thing as a curse going on. In that sense, it fits perfectly with the Awoken people because they also seem both mystical and magical. The fact that the area is made out of what seems to be these floating islands almost make it feel like a place where gods reside, and to some extent they do, or at least godlike creatures like Riven and also Mara Sov, I would say. There's something divine about it in both the architecture and the landscape, and that fits perfectly with what is actually going on in the Dreaming City. Europa, on the other hand, is very much a down-to-earth experience compared to the Dreaming City. This is a barren, frozen wasteland with blizzards and other dangers lurking everywhere. Though underneath all of this is the most advanced technology that we have ever encountered in Destiny. This mix of absolute hardcore nature on the surface and then the nature-defying technology on the ground just creates this awesome contrast and makes the whole place feel unique. Also, the inside of the ice caves look absolutely stunning. This feeling of things being frozen in time both correlates with the story of Beyond Light and Clovis Bray, but also with the new stasis abilities that we obtain as Guardians on the planet. Again, here the environment is part of telling the story, and you kind of feel the beats of the story everywhere you go, from the Fallen scavenging the area to the Vex invading, and the constant presence of the pyramids as well. It's all tied together in a very nice way, and the environment sets the perfect stage for the story that is being told. Now, these are just two examples out of many environments that are and have been in Destiny so far, but Bungie just nails it every time they have to create a new place for the Guardians to find the enemies of humanity. Well, in this gamer's perspective anyway. While the visuals are a very important part of the Destiny experience, I wouldn't say that they're the most important part in making Destiny a great game. That title, I would say, goes to the gameplay. Gameplay. This is the crowning achievement of Destiny, the gameplay. You can argue about a lot of things in Destiny, but you gotta admit, the feeling of playing Destiny is second to none. No one does it as good as Bungie. But why is that? Why does it feel so good when you plow down thousands upon thousands of enemies with high-powered automatic weapons and space magic? Okay, well, now it kinda sounds like a stupid question. But anyways, let's dive into it. Speed. I want to start off with speed because I think that is something that you might not think about right off the bat, but I think it has a huge impact on the gameplay. Destiny is fast paced. You run very fast, your Sparrow is fast, most movements like jumping, throwing grenades, sliding, melee and so on are very fast, and so are your enemies. They teleport, they run around and reposition, and they often come from multiple angles. Well, what does speed do to the gameplay? It first of all adds a level of difficulty that you have to learn to master. To be efficient with your speed, you need to know how to move with your character during combat. Also, when things are going fast, you need to focus, which means that you will be very engaged in the game because it takes all of your attention. This makes the combat feel intense and gets your adrenaline pumping. It also means that a lot is happening most of the time, so you don't get bored. Lastly, it just makes you feel like a badass when you whoop ass that fast. Wait, did I just become a rapper?
Least but not last, it makes you feel like a badass when you whoop ass that fast.
No, I didn't. Okay, so the second thing I want to look at gameplay wise is gunplay. Destiny is famous for its gunplay, but what makes it so special? There are a couple of technical tricks that Bungie pull to make the gunplay feel satisfying. First of all, have you ever noticed that in Destiny you somehow just hit a little better? It seems like it's just easier to hit those headshots than in most other games. That's because it is. It's called bullet magnetism, and what it does is make your target into a bullet magnet. If a bullet flies close by it, the target's magnetic field simply pulls the bullet in the direction of the target. This means that you can be more inaccurate and still hit the target than in most other games. This is a little hard to notice because they pull a lot of other tricks to highlight the impact of the shot. There is the sound of the bullet hitting, hit markers on your crosshairs, and the damage numbers. If you get a yellow damage number when you point the gun at the head of the enemy, you're gonna be satisfied, and so in Destiny you're satisfied a lot. This is part of what makes Destiny combat so satisfying. You feel like a badass marksman even though you're not. That's me, for sure. I normally suck at FPS games. I never play like competitive FPS games like Counter-Strike or stuff like that, but Destiny makes me feel like a rock star, and I love them for that. Another interesting thing about Bungie gunplay that stretches back into the Halo days is that Bungie places the crosshairs a little bit lower on the screen than most other developers. What this does is that because you will usually want your crosshairs to be in the middle of the screen, you will always be looking up a little bit. There's always more sky than ground in your view, and this makes the environment feel a lot more spacey. Combining that with your ability to jump to great heights makes the combat feel bigger, for a lack of a better word. It feels like you're fighting in a larger space and that you can move around in that space really quickly while hitting perfect headshots. There is a sense of grandeur in a Destiny encounter because of this. There are many points about the gunplay we could go into, but I want to pick the ones that I feel have the greatest impact, so I'm going to mention one more before we move on. The sound. The audio work for the weapons in Destiny is amazing. Every single gun has distinct sounds, and the sounds themselves are so well constructed that if you listen closely, you can really hear all the small details of this gun firing, from the blast itself to the mechanical sounds of the gun and the bullet cases falling to the ground. Just listen to a few examples here. So this is a few out of many reasons why the gunplay in Destiny feels great, but the gunplay is only a small part of the gameplay. So what else makes the gameplay of Destiny so good? The co-op. I almost chose to talk about the progression systems in this segment instead, but in the end I have to choose the co-op, because if you took the co-op out of Destiny, Destiny just wouldn't be such an amazing game. The progression plays a huge part as well, for sure, but if you took the progression out of Destiny, it would still feel like Destiny when you played it. You would just probably get bored with it a lot quicker. But the co-op is so important because a major reason so many of us love the game is because we have made friends in the game. We have met people that we have played with for years and now cherish as our friends, and the experiences that you can have with other people in Destiny are just on another level compared to most other games. I'm talking especially about the raids here. The experience of a raid in Destiny, especially the first time you experience it, is just amazing. The first time you step into a raid with a team of 6 people and you all go through this new experience and challenge together, working together as a team, figuring out the encounters, having to coordinate and help each other out, there's no better way to describe it than to say that when you're done with an experience like that, you feel like you've bonded with someone. And you have. On top of that, the raids are so well made in terms of level design, story and game mechanics. Every raid has these unique and very well thought out puzzles and mechanics that makes it impossible to get through without working together as a team. Just to name one thing that Bungie does a lot in raid encounters, let's talk about information restriction. This means that only some of the players have access to information that the entire team needs to complete the task. This could be by giving them a buff that enables them to read something that others can't. It could also be splitting the team into several areas so they solve different tasks that depend on each other. Think about the newest raid, the Deepstone Crypt. Throughout the entire raid, you have these 3 roles: operator, scanner, suppressor, and only those roles can see or do certain things. This forces you to talk to each other, because if you don't, there's no way you can complete the encounter. In a lot of other games, you can do better by communicating and coordinating, but you can play them fine without doing so. This is not possible when doing a raid in Destiny. And so, the co-op element makes Destiny such a different experience because you're forced into these situations where you have to work together and bond with people you have never met before, and that feels really awesome. The gameplay is the core. This is why the game works so well. But around the core is another layer that is just as important in making this experience that we all love to hate. Story. I've often said that the story is what always pulls me back into Destiny. It's not entirely true, it's not the only thing that is pulling me back, but it plays a very big part. In my eyes, the story of Destiny is fantastic. Let's dive into it a little bit. The story in Destiny so far is such an amazing saga of good and evil. The fact that we at this point can trace the forces of good and evil all the way back to the birth of the universe is rad. Because in the Destiny universe, good and evil are not just concepts, they are philosophies that play out as real active participants in the creation of the reality that we play in. Okay, that got a little spacey. Hold on guys, hold on. What I find especially amazing about this story in Destiny is that it has so many characters with so many storylines that intervene, and somehow they manage to keep the amount of loose ends pretty low. I mean, we have many unfinished stories, but you very rarely run into contradicting stories, for example. The characters are really deep and they all have interesting and complicated backstories. The same actually goes for locations and enemies. Almost everything in Destiny has a backstory, even the weapons. This is one of the things that I really enjoy. The fact that there is so much lore that you have to actually sit down and study it if you want to get a handle on the story. Also, the way that the story unravels in the lore I think is genius. We constantly uncover bits and pieces of the story through the different lore books, and sometimes you can only see the full picture by combining several different lore books. What is so brilliant about this is that this is how the history of our own real world is being uncovered. We don't have the full picture, but we constantly uncover bits and pieces that we can then add to all of the pieces we already have to see if they fit together. This just makes the world of Destiny feel very real. The world building in this game is amazing, and now I didn't only put that sentence in here so I can show you guys that I know the word world building.
Big brain.
Often what pulls me back into Destiny after a break is when we uncover some new lore that sets the story in a new perspective. Like when Saint 14 came back and we had that whole time loop with the shotgun where we had retrieved it from his tomb, only to find out later that we were actually the ones to give it to him, and then getting to actually play through that years later. That was a really awesome moment, I think. Music. Just music. Do I really need to say any more? The soundtrack of Destiny is phenomenal. I think most people can agree on this. Not even that, but almost every time they add something new to Destiny, they also add a new soundtrack. New raid, new soundtrack, new strike, new soundtrack, new campaign, new soundtrack, new exotic mission, new soundtrack. The dedication to the music is really paying off, I think, because it gives Destiny a very distinctive feel. I remember the very first time I sat down and played Destiny 2, one of the things that I told my friends about it the next day was the music, because it really made an impact. It was so unusual to hear such a high tier score for a shooter. I sometimes will just listen to the soundtrack on Spotify, if I am writing a script for a YouTube video, for example. The only other game soundtrack that I will just listen to is the soundtrack from Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. The music of Destiny has this sense of grandeur just like the environments. It is awesome because it gives you these associations to space and time. They also sound both ancient and futuristic, which is a very hard balance to hit. They use things like choirs to give this sort of godlike feel to the music, just like in the original Halo soundtrack. Then they use traditional classical instruments to make it sound like a real movie score, and then they mix in more futuristic elements like synthesizers and electronic beats. This mix makes for a very wide range of moods and themes, which is perfect for a game like Destiny that can be both funny, sad and action-packed at the same time. So this was the good parts of Destiny that I wanted to highlight. I think that when you combine all of these things together, you truly have something that stands out, and that is exactly why we all love Destiny deep down. So now, why do we hate it then? Why can this game that we love so much, that fills us with so much joy, also make us rage and uninstall and swear never to play the game again, even though we know that's probably not true? I've chosen 3 points here that I want to talk about because I think these are the biggest contributors to the rage. Let's get into it. Grind level over 9,000! Grinding for loot is the name of the game in Destiny, and even though this is where we spend most of our game time, sometimes it just becomes too much. Too much grind with too little reward is a returning problem in Destiny, like the time where they made a community puzzle which only rewarded the participants access to a quest a week earlier than everyone else.
We're 100% sure we followed what he said, right?
Yes, 10 million fucking percent sure.
Deafin. Oh, this is it?
Deafin.
Go back to Saint. Go back to Saint. Wait, what the
Or something like the grind for the scout rifle range's throwing knife, which is a pretty decent weapon, no question. The grind was just way too much. I actually took a semi-long break from Destiny after getting that weapon because I just felt burned out. It's a hard balance to hit, and sometimes they hit it perfectly, but sometimes they miss the mark completely. And maybe that's exactly the reason why it enrages the community to such an extent, because we know that they can do better. We have experienced way better rewards for less grind, so having to do this insane grind for something mediocre just makes absolutely no sense. Then there is the power level grind. Bungie actually just changed this, so it might get better very soon, but for a long time Bungie has raised the level cap 50 levels every 3 months. This in itself is not a big problem, but the raised level cap seemingly has no other purpose than to have you grind for more hours. You don't get access to anything new, you don't get new abilities when you hit the new level cap. All activities that you could play the previous season just has their level raised, so now you have to raise your own level as well. It makes no sense at all from a player perspective, and therefore has been the cause of a lot of frustration. Story droughts. Some people might call them content droughts, but I actually think that the term story droughts is more fitting, and I'll tell you why. Sometimes as a player in Destiny you experience periods where it just feels like the game is going nowhere. There are things to do, but you don't really care about them, and so you gravitate towards other games for some time. These periods are also the catalyst for a lot of the hate that Destiny is getting. Whenever a big content drop comes along, everyone is really hyped and thinks it's amazing, but then after grinding through all of the new content at a ridiculous speed comes the drought, the vacuum. You stare into the next 2.5 months with no new content coming. You start to feel the anger lurking in your stomach, the need to write a Reddit post about how Destiny 2 sucks, because you play through all of the amazing content and now you want some more, but now there isn't any more, and so Destiny just sucks and Bungie are just a bunch of idiots. It makes so much sense, to be honest. Now, the reason why I personally think that it is more about story than content is that we've had seasons with decent content, but the story for that season was not something that players resonated with, and so they weren't really satisfied with it. We had stuff to do in the season, we just didn't really care. For me, an example of this was the season of The Worthy, I think it was called, the one where Saint 14 came back and we had to go through the corridors of time with Osiris and play the sundial activity. I just didn't care much for the whole Cabal trying to manipulate the time thing. It was like we just came from the season of the Undying and the whole Shadowkeep story with the pyramid ship on the moon and the Black Garden and everything, and then,
whether we wanted it or not,
oh look, it's another war with the Cabal. Like I said earlier, story is very important for keeping the players engaged in Destiny, and sometimes Bungie just doesn't deliver on that. We want more. The third and final point that I want to make about why Destiny sucks is that we simply just want more. Destiny in my eyes is always very close to drowning in its own success. Because the things that Bungie has nailed, they have done so incredibly well that we as players just want more all the time. We as a player base have an unquenchable thirst for more of the good Destiny content. More raids, more interesting ways of doing combat, more lore, more story. We want to know what is going to happen with the Traveler and the Pyramid ships, and we want to see more stasis subclasses. We want more awesome exotics, and we want to enjoy more experiences with our friends. Sadly, Bungie can only deliver so much, and no matter how much they put out, it's never going to be enough for this player base. We just want more, and that sucks. It sucks when you're left with this feeling of constantly wanting more, but it's also why we love the game so much. And this is the essence, I think, of this whole juxtaposition. This is why I hate Destiny, and this is why it's my favorite game. I have never played any game as long as I've played Destiny, and I've never put so many hours into one single game as Destiny 2. And at the same time, I've never been more frustrated and wanted to quit from a game than Destiny 2. Destiny is so good that it's bad, because they can never put out enough content for us to play through, and that is the everlasting curse of being a Destiny player. So my friends, if you want to connect with me or other gaming watchers, feel free to join the Discord. There's a link in the description. Okay, I think that was it. So as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.